Welcome to the next episode of Voices That Matter. My guest today is Rick Levine, the legend, as I call him. Rick integrates quantum mechanics, astrology, and the cosmic intelligence to redefine our understanding of reality. Rick, it's a true honor to have you here on Voices That Matter today. You've spent over 50 years decoding the cosmic patterns and the music of the spheres, and in a world that feels increasingly chaotic, your perspective is a rare gift. I'm so grateful for your time and your presence today. Thank you for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure. I say that before the experience, but I'm assuming afterwards I will still say it was my pleasure.
I will give my best.
Me too. It's a deal.
Hey, Rick, in my work, I remind people that the mind is not actually a creating tool, it is a receptive one, like an antenna. But people are so busy making mental noise that they've forgotten how to just listen to the broadcast. If our minds are meant to be receivers, what are we failing to hear because we're so obsessed with our own thinking?
Well, your question has a lot of assumptions in it that unfortunately a lot of people don't have. And because a lot of people believe, because we're kind of taught that even in school, that our brain is the center of consciousness and that we are a biological being with a nervous system that has self-awareness, and therefore people tend to be overwhelmed with their own noise that actually prevents them from the true understanding. Now, in Hinduism, there is a concept called Maya, and Maya is loosely Sanskrit word, loosely translated as a veil of illusion. But what it really means is that when we look around and see our lives and people and things and take in information, that we think this is reality, and in fact these are just interference patterns of very high frequency vibrations, and that reality is simply electric digital impulses that at the subatomic level we might say are quantum events, and yet we think that we are solid. We think that we are real, and just the way you phrased the question makes me smile because not only do ancient traditions, but modern scientists now exploring consciousness have come to the frightening realization for many of them, I think the reassuring realization for many of us, and their realization is that consciousness does not originate in the brain, and that in fact the idea of our entire nervous system is a complex form of what might be looked at as a radio transceiver, meaning that we receive and that we resend, we receive and then we send electromagnetic vibrations. And so, this idea of consciousness beginning inside our heads is actually an illusion. It's a grand illusion, and at times it can be a very fun and exciting illusion, and at times it can be a very difficult and painful illusion. But it's an illusion.
What's the truth then, from your perspective?
Oh, I know what the truth is. Uh, that's the truth.
We just leave it there.
Yeah, you know why humans have such short necks?
No.
Uh, uh,
I
because we
understand.
don't know. And you know, I've probably like you, I've spent a great deal of my life exploring this I don't knownness, trying to understand it. I mean, we can look at the what I like to call the Alan Watts concept, which really isn't his. It really is an old Hindu idea, and that is that the Linda Schneider game, the Rick Levine game, are basically games that God plays creating this riddle, trying to, totally isolate us from the truth. And then the life becomes this process of trying to find our way back to who we are. I mean, the bottom line is that as an astrologer, which I've been studying, practicing for, I guess, about 55 years now, so maybe even a little more. I just turned 77 and I feel like a teenager. But I think that being an astrologer, I look at the world in a way that integrates the very large and the very small. A number of years ago, I read a book by Roger Penrose, who is a British mathematician, physicist, very highly respected. A lot of people call him the brains behind Stephen Hawking. He's the guy that came up with the idea of the black hole and was one of Stephen Hawking's teachers. And is known for Penrose tiles, which is a mathematical topological problem that he was known to create some breakthroughs on. Very smart guy. My favorite of his books is a book called The Emperor's New Mind, which is really a stunning look at the question is there a way when you're engaging with something on the outside to know whether there's deep consciousness there or just surface behavior? And this goes back to Alan Turing, the British cryptologist, the Turing machine that basically created this idea of we could always know whether we're engaging with real consciousness or just surface behavior, which of course these days in the day of artificial intelligence, which I like to call augmented or alchemical intelligence, this has become more of an issue. Anyhow, back to Roger Penrose. Roger Penrose wrote a book called The Very Large, the Very Small, and the In-Between. And it would be a brilliant book by a brilliant man, except he doesn't have a fucking clue. because he's lost the plot, because there is no understanding and no mention of the ancient science and study of how the upstairs and the downstairs relate. The upstairs being the very large, the downstairs being the very small. We could call this the macrocosm or cosmology, the planets, the stars, the universes, the everything that's grand and out there. And then what's inside would be the subatomic realms, the particle physics and quantum physics, but it would also be everything in our psyche, everything in our inner world, which of course has no size because somehow everything that's in the outer world fits in the inner world. And so how someone could write a book about the very large, the macrocosm, and the very small, the microcosm, and not understand that we here on the mesocosm, meso Latin for middle, that we here on the mesocosm are really just surfing waves of interference from the very high frequencies and very low frequencies. We call that consciousness. But the real magic of this comes from an ancient apocryphal book or tablet called the Emerald Tablet, allegedly given to Thoth, who was the Egyptian version of Hermes, who was the Greek version of Mercury. All of these are gods of thought, of thinking. In fact, they are all psychopomps. Psychopomp being a being that leads souls between worlds, this world to that world. Shamans are psychopomps of sorts. But Thoth and Hermes, and in the ancient Greek and late Egyptian period, the name given to Hermes was Hermes Trismegistus, meaning Hermes the 3 times great, Hermes the thrice, great or wise, magistus. And, and it's important here to note that in a patriarchal world, Thoth or Hermes gets all the credit, but it was actually his partner in crime, Seshat, who actually, a feminine entity, who actually gave us mathematics and languaging and astrology, and he was just her front man. I mean, kind of. This is we're still in that world where the guys stand on stage teaching, getting all the credit, and the wise women sitting in the back saying, "That's what I told them to say." But the thing that is attributed to Hermes the thrice great, or Thoth, is this apocryphal work called the Emerald Tablet. And the Emerald Tablets begin with a statement that most people have heard but may not know where it comes from. And the statement is, "As above, so below." It's often thrown around in New Age, cosmic, especially astrological conversations, as above, so below. It was even the title of a book by a now late great astrologer named Alan Oken. But the problem is that those are only the first few words of a longer sentence. And what was written on the Emerald Tablet is as follows: "As above, so below. The within of things is as the without of things."
Huh.
And what that means is that one is not a reflection of the other. One doesn't cause the other. They're the same thing. We just perceive them as inside and outside and as opposite. And that becomes an important concept that goes, again, all the way back to Hinduism, Buddhism, this idea of what's sometimes called qualified non-dualism or dualism, where we have this sense of inside and outside. But here's the important thing. And the important thing is that if the upstairs, my word for that, but the outside, the cosmos, the macrocosm, and the inside, the downstairs, the microcosm, if they're the same thing, then we have a very important thing to face. And that is that everything that we have learned as a technologically mind-expanded species, that through our technology of the past 150 years, we've learned a whole lot about the very tiny, the microcosm, and in fact had to alter everything that we thought about the physical world as we delved into the subatomic realms and were stunned that the mechanical laws of the three-dimensional world didn't work when you got into the very tiny. And this is, of course, the origin of quantum physics. Well, all the same principles that we attribute to quantum physics at the microcosmic level actually also happen at the macrocosmic level. And this is where I think astrology becomes useful. I mean, it's useful as a time map. It's useful to help us become more aware of who we are in our relationship between our very small and very large. It's very useful in understanding the timing of things of our lives. It's very useful in understanding, especially in this day and age, understanding our history, our recorded history within the past few thousand years, and how these patterns repeat and repeat and repeat based upon very knowable and very apparent astrological cycles, but they're only apparent if you know about the cycles. Otherwise, they're invisible. And so this, quantum physics basically discovered, as we looked into the subatomic realms, that the whole idea of cause and effect, which was a basic underlying foundational concept to Western science, as pretty much discovered and utilized by Galileo, by Newton, by David Hume, who basically came up with the laws of making a hypothesis and retesting, which is what modern science is built upon. And as these physicists in the early 20th century, physicists like Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg and Max Born and Max Planck and Albert Einstein, they began to realize that at the subatomic level, there was no cause and effect, that everything was probable but not certain. And they discovered that unlike Newton's gravity, that in the subatomic realms, that two things that were far apart could still have an interaction, something called non-locality. They discovered that everything was connected to everything all the time, totally unlike what we know of as we navigate around our world of things. And there were several other things. But it turns out that this then becomes a key to reframing what many people call the ancient superstition or blasphemies, as Johannes Kepler referred to astrology. I don't know if you ever heard the term "don't throw the baby out with the bathwater."
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Well, that actually it was first written in a book entitled Tertium Inter Venus, which kind of means third, tertium, tertiary third, inter Venus in between. And Tertium Inter Venus really meant third man in the middle. And it was a book by Johannes Kepler saying that while modern natural philosophers, what we now call scientists, were studying the world, that while they looked at, and this is the direct quote from Kepler, when they looked at the ancient superstitions and blasphemies contained in astrology, Kepler cautioned moderners, this is in the early 1600s, quote, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, end quote. And so that quote actually comes from that source. And the thing is that as we moved into the age of enlightenment, where the intellectual functions were expanding and science was analyzing things, and we had the development of Cartesian coordinates from people like Rene Descartes, and we had mathematics and Isaac Newton and Galileo and all these people and philosophers that created what we called the Enlightenment or the Age of Reason. I have an associate, a man named Robert Hand, who often refers to the Age of Enlightenment as the Age of Endarkenment, because it was from that period. And again, we got a lot of amazing stuff out of that couple, 200-300 year, sidetracking, but we lost track of the fact that everything is connected to everything, that humans aren't outside of nature and therefore have to manage it. Humans are part of a natural process. Somehow we lost that. We forgot. And so I think what we're seeing right now in all around the planet Earth is we're seeing a confronting of the downfall of a way of looking at the external world that goes back to your original opening question, and all you need to do is give me a little thread and I'm gone, But and your opening question was about this idea that we are receivers or transceivers, because we're not only receiving, but then we're also then resending. I had a friend in college, a man named Sandy Pearlman, who is actually the lyricist and producer of a group called the Blue Oyster Cult. And Sandy was a brilliant poet. He wrote the lyrics to almost all of their songs on at least their first 5 albums or so. And one of the things that Sandy used to say, I mean, he wrote it down, but he used to say it, is thoughts are orbital. and return to the sender via other people's minds that are used as crossover points. Fucking brilliant.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Our orbital and return to their sender via other people's minds that are used as crossover points. And this whole idea that we receive and we send and we receive and we resend and we have this illusion that we're doing it. No, when I wrote this poem many years ago called Radios. I don't know if you know the work of Bruce Lipton, who
Yeah.
wrote The Biology of Belief. Bruce and I go way back, 35 years, and actually, when I first met him, I wrote this poem, and I've always referred to it as my Bruce Lipton poem. Bruce refers to it as his Rick Levine poem. I appreciate that, but it basically talks about how the planets, and you use the word harmony. Pythagoras and Kepler used the term the music of the spheres. And this idea that planets are not any more solid than subatomic particles. Because one of the other great breakthroughs of quantum mechanics is that no one's ever seen a photon, a packet of light. No one's ever seen an electron. What we see is technically a cloud of electron possibilities. We don't know where anyone is at any one time because at the quantum level, there's this thing called superposition. Anyhow, when we look up in the sky and we see the moon, we're popping that quantum wave function, just like when someone measures a light wave and in a moment we can see a particle, but the particle doesn't really exist. And if we don't look at it, it goes on traveling like a wave. Well, when we look at the moon, we see a particle. My students call them BFPs, big fucking particles. But they're still particles. And when we don't look at it, the moon is basically humming at 13 cycles a year. Pluto is humming at 4 cycles a millennium.
Wow.
But they're still hum. They're low, 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 low. They're very low frequency hums. And so this idea that we are part of this world of vibration where there are no things, everything is vibration. And so it just goes back to this idea that as radios, we can understand intellectually that we are radio receivers that are attuned to the universal broadcasts of life. But here's the thing, that in this poem I discuss scientists who are basically, let me back up a second. Before that, as I'm thinking about all of these, waves of planets, I take my radio and I go to my radio and I open it up to look for the symphony that was just before coming from inside the radio. But I can look inside the radio and I can see resistors and printed circuits and wires and tuning things, but there's no symphony. Whether the music was the power of Wagner or the majesty of Tchaikovsky or our latest, thing that we're listening to that's probably bad music on a radio or whatever it is, or good music. There's certainly a lot of good music. It's not inside the radio, and you can't find it inside the radio. And then, with that very same determination that we might have looking for the symphony inside the radio, scientists look for the source of life and look for the phantom captain inside of an animal. They're dissecting animal brains, looking for it, without realizing that there's nothing inside to find because we're radios. And when you break the radio, the broadcast station doesn't go off the air.
Let me jump in here real quick.
Yeah, I'm done with my...
No, you're great. I knew this is going to happen, and I love it. Um, I was in a relationship with a quantum physicist for several years. And me, since I've been decoding frequencies since I was a child, that a lot of people can't decode, right? So I grew up like that. It was my normal reality. And being in this relationship, we figured out that we're talking about the exact same thing, but in with other terms, other
With different
words.
languaging. Yeah.
Right. And it was so interesting because there was no difference. Like he was talking about exactly what I am experiencing and vice versa. And
Yep.
I like it because quantum physicists themselves, they say, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I have no idea, I know nothing. And I love that because I don't know nothing either. But, in today's world, a lot of people talk about the 3D world and 5D world and how do we get from 3D to 5D. And I keep saying it's not a place, it's a frequency. And there's this term timeline, right? And for me personally, it's like the wrongest word for what we're talking about there could be because it's not a line and it's not time. But I get it. We have to find terms that we all like kind of know what we're talking about. But what
But
is your, yeah,
timelines are easy because in a biological system, we have a birth and we have a death. We have a timeline, and therefore we project what we know about our own being onto everything. And we look at history and we go, this happened in 1492 and this happened in 1721. And we make a timeline that goes from the very beginning, which we can never get back to, up until now, but we can't extend it into the future because we haven't been there yet. And so this idea of time being a line is a very narrow perception. Again, going to Hinduism, their understanding of time is more cyclical. And so therefore they have the wheel of samsara. They have this concept of life, death, other, back, rebirth, life, death, other, and it's going round and round and round on this endless cycle. But then, and of course, the goal of Hinduism for many is to become aware of that cycle so that you're not endlessly, going round and round and round. But then when you move into Buddhism, and in particular Vajrayana Buddhism, which some people consider to be the penthouse, pinnacle of Buddhism, everything that's ever happened and everything that ever will happen is happening right now. And there's this concept called the Buddhist theory of instantaneous space and time. And yet anyone who's done serious spiritual work, mystics, whether they're Jewish or Catholic, Christian mystics, Buddhist mystics from anywhere on the planet, understand that when we're not in a body, when we're not in a three-dimensional world, there is no time. Time is a function of being in a growing and then decaying biological system. But that's not reality. That's an illusion. Sorry I cut you off, but the
no, you didn't.
timeline thing is so important because there are no timelines. In fact, the great Buckminster Fuller, thinker Bucky Fuller, used to say there are no straight lines in nature, ever, period.
Yep, true. Wow, there's so much to talk about. You speak my soul, seriously. I'm listening and I'm like, oh, it's so nourishing. Yeah, I totally agree. And because I can see energies and I work that way, like I'm aware that also the body is only energy. I grow up in a school medicine family. So they're, until today, they're very mind-based and very convinced of what they have learned at university. That's the only reality and truth.
Sure.
And because the body is also only energy, right? So you can change the frequency at any time, at any second. And so the so-called miracle healings that what they talk about in hospitals, I don't know, it's a miracle. For me, it's not a miracle. It's just let me try to put that into words, like someone that was so aligned in a moment that the frequency could go to its original,
Sure.
not even healed place, but like the never damaged kind of state. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what is your perspective on that?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, my perspective on it is, yeah, that's the way it is. Number two, not everyone has the ability, natural or trained, to be able to move through frequencies that are outside of the realm of our five senses. Remember, you go back 150 years, and if you couldn't see it, taste it, hear it, smell it, or touch it, it didn't exist. Period. That was it. It didn't exist. And yet now we live in a world where even though people still say something about the senses, we know that the senses really, more than anything else, limit us from seeing things the way they are, that our senses are what biologists today would call a reality tunnel. But, like it used to be that if you and I were here, we would be in the same space. So you and I are here right now. When is now and where is here? Because right now could be at 3 a.m. in the morning for someone in Sydney, Australia, and it could be mid-afternoon for someone, in Europe, and it could be like before sunrise for someone on the west coast of the United States. When is now? Now, and where is here? Is here on my computer screen, or is it on your computer screen? Or is it somewhere in a non-local consciousness reality that, because of the magic of technology that you and I are getting to share in this moment, but it's very obvious that technology, even astrology, which is a technology, are reliable crutches. That we can't do anything with technology that we can't do biologically. And that, in fact, all technology is based upon biology and then manufactured and then used for social use. I mean, a wheel, this isn't my idea. This goes back to the 1960s, 70s media guru, Marshall McLuhan, who kind of wrote the book. I mean, he literally wrote the book. One of his books was The Medium is the Massage, which everyone thinks is the medium is the message. But when we create a new medium, whether it's a printed book, a printing press, a radio, a television, Zoom, whatever the new medium is, that we create the medium, but then the medium recreates us and reorganizes our sensory ratios. And although McLuhan wrote about this from a historical and technological point of view, mystics have known this forever. The great English mystic poet William Blake wrote in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell a line that many people don't know, that Jim Morrison, when he named his group The Doors, he took it from this William Blake poem because Blake had done some psychedelics, read Aldous Huxley's book called Heaven and Hell, went back to William Blake and read The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, and found this line that said, this is a direct quote, if the doors of perception were cleansed, the doors of perception meaning our five senses, if the doors of perception were cleansed, then everything would appear as it is, infinite and holy. End of story.
Period. Yeah. Wow. But hey, when you speak to someone who can't really let this truth in and decode different frequencies, someone who's kind of caught in their own microcosmos.
So you mean a muggle?
Exactly. And let's say this someone is like stuck, feels stuck, isn't stuck, but feels stuck, like a lot of people do those days, and blocked and sad and depressed. And so what is there any piece of advice you can offer to someone like that?
Well, the answer is yes, but it's not a one size fits all. I think that there are different things that different people can do at different times. And I mean, I look at my work as an astrologer as something that I can do. It doesn't reach everyone, but if I have the luxury of sitting with someone for an hour in an individual consultation, nine times out of 10, they leave with their head spun around and can never quite go back into their old world view. Now, even and I like to say that I opted out. Although when I did my undergraduate work, I was going to be a Jungian analyst, and I opted out of becoming a psychologist because psychologists are therapists, and I've instead become a catalyst. A therapist sits with someone while they work through their process, which is an important thing. I'm a catalyst. I like to just explode the lightning, move on, and let the person then either pick up the pieces or go to work with their therapist, which is good stuff to do. And so I think that one of the things we can do is giving someone the right information in a non-confrontive way at the right time, not a I'm right and you're wrong, or you're not seeing the big picture or whatever, but simply spoon feeding someone just enough that gets them to question something, because it's that moment of doubt. It's the asking of the questions that actually creates the process that manufactures what we call reality. And if you're not asking questions, you're not making any new reality. You know, everyone has, I shouldn't say everyone, I have, and I know many other people who have friends that used to be very interesting until they discovered Scientology or Jesus Christ, or MAGA, or quantum physics, or Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Shoshuren Buddha. It doesn't matter. When you discover something that's it, you become a bore because you stop questioning and you stop creating new reality. You just, I wrote many years ago, and if I didn't have to make a living being an astrologer, I would just read and write poetry. But I wrote many, many years ago this little couplet that went, "Too much looking often blinds the eye that seeks, yet never finds." And then I went on to say that although too much looking blinds one from seeing a truth, that you have to be careful where you stop looking, because wherever you stop looking, that becomes it. And that it can be, the it is always dangerous. I mean, yes, I am an astrologer, but I'm also many other things. To me, astrology is not it. It's interesting, it's useful, it's a fantastic mapping system, it's a great lens through which to look at the illusions of reality. But there are many other mapping tools that are also very useful and very interesting. Astrology isn't it, it's one, And so I think we have to be careful about having an it.
Yeah, that you kind of reminded me. When people ask me, like in podcasts, when it's the other way around, what are you? So you are the curandera, you are a healer. I'm like, yeah, also, but I can't define myself with one of those terms. I'm just, even to myself, I'm just a mystery. I don't even know. I get up and I just see what's going to happen. So
I have a friend who used to have a friend who used to have a business card that had his name on it, and underneath it just said breather.
Oh,
He said, "Well, that's what I do more than anything else."
yeah, right at the moment we're breathing. Yeah, right.
Who are you? I'm a breather.
And I think one of the most important things, like when I work with people, is to bring them or help them come back to stillness again, because for me, stillness is key. It's like where the key is hidden, in my opinion, that they learn again to just sit with themselves. No breathing techniques, no mantras, no meditation, nothing. Just sit and stare at the wall for long enough, to be really present, and everything comes up and everything, they can really feel themselves again. And this might sound very simple, but it's very difficult for a lot of people.
I think Van Morrison wrote a song about that. No guru, no anything, just you and me in the garden.
Yeah, exactly. And in my case, it's you and the wall. It's just there's nothing, and that's been very effective for people. But most
going back to the radio's concept. It's like if your radio is manufacturing so much noise, you'll never be able to pick up the stations that are out there that may be playing something that's very resonant and very important and very life affirming and very meaningful.
Right, exactly. What is your opinion on the, I have heard that lately, like the okay, let's say human mind and the conscious mind or higher mind, or there's different terms. Like, I don't see this kind of separation because I know everything is here right now, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that everything is vibration and it's kind of like a cosmic soup. Astrologically, we might call it Pisces, which is just simply, on one hand, it's the swamp that everything decays into, but on the other hand, it's the sack of amniotic fluids that everything crystallizes and grows out of. And so I think that there are that all these vibrations are asynchronous, meaning that they're incoherent, they're all frequencies, but nature has this way of saving energy by entraining frequencies that are close to one another. It's like if you put 10 women into a dormitory, their menstrual cycles will often kind of begin to, not 100%, but they'll begin to kind of coalesce. The Dutch clockworker Leon Christopher Huygens noted back in the 1600s when he was working with pendulum clocks that he would leave his clockmaking workshop in the evening and he would wind up every clock, get all the weights right, and start the pendulums going, and they would be going they'd be and he'd come in the morning and they would all be going the same. That if you live in a place where there are what we call lightning bugs, and the sun goes down, you see in a field the blink, 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 and the whole field's lit up. And by a half an hour or an hour after dark, the whole field is going blink, blink. Nature conserves energy by interlocking or entraining patterns or harmonies that are close. Just like when you're singing. If someone sings a note, and you sing another note, eventually, if you hold those notes, they'll kind of slide into some harmony or even the same note. So from that standpoint, yes, I think an attuned mind understands that there's just all these frequencies out there. But because humans like to entrain and they like to be able to find synchronous patterns, that we tend to take these hums and put them together, and then our minds create different energy constructs. We give them names. We do this, again, this comes from a William Blake work, where he talks about ancient people saw mountains and clouds and cities, and they gave each of these different kind of concepts based upon their properties. And then the priesthood came along and named them and put them into gods and took the power away from what they were. And Blake said, thus the priesthood was born, and humans forgot that all deities reside within the human breast. Mm-hmm. So the point here is that some people just perceive the swamp, and other people, the Capricorn, let's say, or Earth sign people, may end up doing the patterning and see actual patterns, which can be very useful. Because if you're doing energy work, for example, there are times when you want to help a person or your own being, your own self, you want to coalesce a certain type of energy and not the soup. And so there's reasons to be able to see the difference between the two of them, but having one perception, what you described, and another perception, that is the labels of 5,000 Hindu gods or whatever, are not necessarily what's the word I'm looking for? Exclusive. Like Niels Bohr once quipped. Niels Bohr once said, "The opposite of a truth can be true too."
Right? It's similar to there is no right and wrong, and what I just said is right.
Yeah,
I love that
yeah,
so much.
yeah.
Um, all right, Rick, we're running out of time a little bit, but I would have
No, no,
one
no,
last.
no, 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 no. We're running out of the illusion of time.
Exactly, thank you.
But
So
okay.
I
Yeah.
agree. Let's say you were talking, we mentioned Pisces and Capricorn. Now I'm a double Scorpio, so I'm very much a water sign. When you, okay, how do I phrase this? In today's world, when you see the water signs, air signs, earth signs, and fire signs, what would you say is their main frequency, or, the water signs and the air signs and all of them?
Okay, two things here. First of all, the concept of hot, cold, wet, dry, which created fire, earth, air, water, go back to the early Greek period of time. Plotinus and Plato write about these, elements. Um, Many people, many modern intellectuals and psychologists rely on Carl Jung for being such an important 20th century figure in taking what was Freud's pioneering work and blasting through the illusion of what's on the surface into something that was beneath the surface. And then it was Carl Jung who took that concept and widened it into larger archetypal realms. What most people don't realize is that Carl Jung didn't call his psychology Jungian psychology any more than Jesus called his teachings, Christianity, or Buddha called his teachings Buddhism. They were just their teachings. But Carl Jung did have a name for his work, and he called it analytical psychology, or the psychology of four types. And the four types were what he noted, which he acknowledged he got from the Greeks, but he noted that people seem to emphasize a way or two ways of interacting with the world, and other people would de-emphasize one or two, and those ways were thinking, feeling, intuiting, and perceiving. This is Carl Jung's breakthrough in analytical psychology, was this, what he called the psychology of four types, which actually then became complexified a bit, added the introversion, extroversion spectrum, and it became the Myers-Briggs, that whole personality labeling or construction. But according to Jung, thinking is associated, and this is also Plato, by the way, thinking is associated with air. Emotions are connected or associated with water or feelings. Sensation is, of the five senses, sensation is associated with earth, and intuition is associated with fire. Now, that's where many astrologers go wrong. You ask most astrologers, what's the most intuitive sign? And most of them will say, that would be Pisces or Scorpio or Cancer. They go to the water signs for intuitive. No, the water signs feel, and they may be hypersensitive in their feelings, but intuition is fire, because intuition is doing something without thinking, feeling, or sensing.
Yep.
Fire doesn't say, oh, look, there's some dry pine trees over there. I think I'll go that, well, no, but if I go that way, I'll burn it really fast. Maybe I'll go that way and go for those oaks. It'll take a little longer. Fire doesn't think, it just does, because it's intuitive. And so that's the one-to-one relationship between fire, earth, air, water. The water signs, which are Cancer and Scorpio and Pisces, for example, they are feeling based, and feelings are always based upon a prior experience. Feeling, you don't have a good or bad feeling unless you're associating it with some other feeling that you once had or some experience. But Cancer feelings, Cancerian crab, basically is feeling something new that is changing, and therefore the crab wants to protect, has a hard outer shell. Scorpio, which is fixed water, can be looked at either as ice. When it's there's an astrological kind of, I wouldn't say joke, but you get a bunch of astrologers going, in a room. Oh, what's your sign? I'm an Aries. I'm the Gemini. I'm a this. What's your sign? I'm not telling you. Oh, you're a Scorpio. Because ice, when Scorpio derives power from what it doesn't say, it holds energy in, but it's not just ice. If you do any whitewater, canoeing or kayaking, when water is moving fast, there's places where those rapids are that don't move. The water's moving. It's like being at the bottom of a waterfall. That water is coming at you like a fire hose with intensity, it's like a diamond hitting you. And so that's fixed water, Scorpio. And then the changeable or mutable water, Pisces, basically says, I feel this on the inside, I have this determination, the fixed energy, but I'm going back and forth between them, and therefore you end up with the compassion, or the interrelation of Pisces. And the same could be done with each of the other elements. That's a short answer. I could spend a day talking about the elements.
I could be listening forever, really. It's so, so interesting. Oh, wow. All right, Rick. I could really be going on forever. Well, let's do this another time again if you want to, anytime from my side, really. And thank you so much for your presence. I won't say for your time, but your presence and your wisdom. I appreciate you very, very
No,
much.
I appreciate it. The chance to share this with people who may not have heard some of my material. If people want to follow up, I do a free monthly YouTube that is a forecast for the month ahead. It's not by sign. It's basically, I like to call it the astrological weather report for the month ahead. You don't have to be an astrologer to get something out of it, but there is a lot of astrology in it. So if you're not an astrologer, you can let that wash over you. It's a teaching tool as far as I'm concerned. And I also teach, around the world. I'll be back in India this fall for a 2-week retreat. I'll be at a conference in London at the new moon, the middle of May, 15th through the 18th. And people can find me at ricklevineastrologer.com. That's my website. And if you can't find me on the internet in any way, shape, or form, whether it's on YouTube or Instagram or Substack, then you shouldn't be allowed to be on the internet.
Yeah, I'll put all the information in the caption just to be sure. Also, yeah, well, we should invite you to Switzerland then.
I accept.
Yeah, good. All right, let's do this. All right, Lick, thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.